The crown is never handed over on a silver platter. It is a binding contract, one with strict conditions and serious consequences. According to sources, with direct access to the highest levels of the palace, King Charles reportedly spoke those exact words this week inside a heavily secured, oak-paneled room at Windsor Castle. For a long time, much of the public believed the king would prioritize his role as a father over his responsibilities as sovereign. Many assumed he was quietly keeping the door open for his younger son to return. That assumption now appears to have been entirely wrong. What is unfolding represents a deep structural shift in how the monarchy operates. Reports emerging from palace corridors suggest a carefully planned, step-by-step process is already underway to formally weaken, and potentially remove, the Sussex's remaining royal standing. This effort has placed the Duke and Duchess in a position of serious and unfamiliar legal exposure. With a critical family meeting at Sandringham approaching, King Charles is said to have moved beyond patience and reconciliation. He is now acting with the sharp focus of a monarch determined to protect the institution he leads. The situation has passed the stage of private discussions or emotional repair. At its center lies information Prince Harry reportedly believed would remain sealed forever within private archives at Althorpe. Those documents, now allegedly presented to the Privy Council, are said to support the most severe outcome imaginable: the complete removal of all royal titles and honors. The gravity of that moment is difficult to overstate. A silent room heavy with tension. Sensitive documents spread across the table. And a monarch who has finally concluded that the institution he spent 70 years preparing to lead cannot be allowed to fracture from within. Prince Harry, by all accounts, moved forward under the belief that his status was permanent, an untouchable birthright beyond the reach of law or authority. He appeared confident he could continue benefiting from royal prestige while simultaneously undermining the foundation that gave it meaning. That calculation now seems disastrously flawed. Reports indicate the king uncovered a moral breach serious enough to violate the solemn pledge Harry made at his wedding. This matter goes far beyond health concerns or disputes with the press. It is a high-stakes failure with consequences on every level. Behind closed doors, strategic meetings between King Charles and Prince William reportedly produced a firm, uncompromising plan. The monarchy, it seems, is prepared to defend itself at any cost. Central to this effort is an obscure clause within the 1917 letters patent, rarely discussed, but now under intense scrutiny. Issued by King George V, the document defines who is entitled to the style of His or Her Royal Highness. Charles is said to be using this provision as the primary legal mechanism to move forward. Time is now working against Harry. Sources suggest he has less than 48 hours to halt an official order that would permanently strip him of the title of prince. The king has made it clear that claims of privacy will no longer protect Harry's commercial ventures. A final, non-negotiable demand has already been issued. This is not simply a family dispute. It is a defining moment for the future of the monarchy. Sandringham House, long known for its stark and formal atmosphere, has reportedly taken on an even colder tone this week. In its long library, King Charles is said to have presented a comprehensive dossier to his most trusted advisors. This was not a collection of media clippings. It was a detailed investigation into Harry's financial activities and legal maneuvers over the past several years. At the center of the file lies an alleged breach of the 2020 separation agreement, one Harry reportedly treated as flexible guidance rather than a binding constitutional obligation. Legal sources connected to the Crown claim the evidence shows Harry pursued trademark registrations involving royal symbols and names for international commercial projects, despite explicit prohibitions. But even that was not the most damaging revelation. What ultimately pushed King Charles toward revocation were allegations of undisclosed communications between the Sussexes and officials from a foreign government, conversations that could compromise the monarchy's strict requirement of political neutrality. For a king who has spent his life maintaining the delicate balance between crown, church, and state, this line was impossible to ignore. One palace insider reportedly said Harry is no longer seen as a disappointed son, but as a potential threat to the constitutional order itself. As the documents were reviewed, it became clear that Harry's actions extended beyond financial ambition. They suggested the quiet construction of an alternative power base operating from California. Every olive branch offered by the king had allegedly been repurposed as material for future media deals. Among the most troubling discoveries were claims that Harry kept detailed private notes regarding King Charles's health, information possibly intended for later publication. For the king, this represented an irreversible breach. Though the father may still feel the pain, the sovereign has not wavered. After reviewing the evidence, King Charles authorized the Privy Council to begin drafting formal revocation papers. Harry, sources say, was caught completely off guard. He believed his father would never risk public backlash by taking decisive action. He misjudged how deeply committed the king is to safeguarding the monarchy for William and for George. The upcoming meeting is not a negotiation. It exists solely to enact a process already decided. In constitutional monarchies, symbols are not decorative, they carry real power. Titles are the vessels through which influence flows. King Charles reportedly understands that addressing the challenge from California requires striking at the core of identity itself. And that brings the focus back to the 1917 letters patent. Long assumed by Harry to be untouchable inheritance, it has now become the legal instrument that may redefine everything he thought was permanent. Experts in law who work with the Duchess of Lancaster say the king is looking closely at a formal removal grounded in the idea of a major failure to fulfill royal responsibilities. The case being built inside palace rooms argues that holding a royal title isn't just an honorary badge you wear. It's actually a working role tied directly to serving the crown. When someone sets up businesses that make money, specifically by criticizing the monarchy, they have, in effect, walked away from the duties of being a prince. This is about running the institution properly, not about a father being upset. Think of it as the chief executive protecting the organization against an attempted takeover from outside. What Charles showed the advisors at the upcoming meeting suggests the 1917 rules allow the reigning monarchs to release new letters patent as needed, which can change the status of relatives who move permanently abroad and get involved in conduct that clashes with the dignity expected of the crown. Harry's advisors apparently convinced him that the king would never go this far because the public backlash would be too strong. They got that wrong. Reports say the king's lawyers have already prepared paperwork that would reclassify Harry simply as Mr. Henry Mountbatten Windsor if he doesn't meet the final conditions. The king is said to have told William directly that any rot caused by disloyalty needs to be cut away completely before it spreads and harms the next reign. What started as family tension has grown into the formal removal of a prince who apparently saw himself as bigger than the throne he came from. The timer is now running, and inside the exclusive world of California, a heavy silence has taken hold. King Charles has apparently issued a last non-negotiable condition that sent ripples all the way across the ocean. Harry has exactly 48 hours to sign a strict agreement locking in confidentiality and promising no further criticism or else face the immediate activation of the letters patent. Revocation. This goes way beyond asking everyone to get along. It's effectively an official end to the Sussex commercial and social operation. People inside the palace describe the situation as an urgent countdown, a narrow period where Harry has to decide if holding on to his pride matters more than keeping his royal standing. In California, the feeling right now mixes real fear with frantic activity from lawyers. Harry is said to be working every possible contact, reaching out to his legal groups in both London and Los Angeles, looking for any way to push back the king's decision. But the path Charles has chosen doesn't leave any gaps. Unlike earlier times, when long back and forth talks happened, the king has shut down all further conversation. A high-ranking official at court reportedly said the king has laid out two clear paths, one leading back to some form of acceptance, the other straight to total exclusion. The decision rests entirely with Harry. The pressure grows sharper because Harry sees a frightening fact staring him in the face. Losing the prince title could wipe out his entire value in the American marketplace. Right now, he's dealing with serious cash shortages, including a $14 million home loan and large continuing costs for security and image management. If the king takes his name off the official royal lists, Harry doesn't just lose a label, he loses the financial backstop that's kept his way of living going since he left the UK. Reports point to Prince William as the one insisting on the tight 48-hour limit. He has apparently pressed his father to stay strong, pointing out that every extra hour Harry keeps the prince title while continuing to criticize the crown causes more damage to the institution itself. The requirement is crystal clear: total silence or total loss. As the light fades across the fields around Althorpe and along the Norfolk coast, Harry is starting to grasp that the financial help from his father and the Spencer family resources are now overshadowed by a king who has run out of patience completely. The final clash over the Sussex's place in the royal world has reached its closing stage. While court activity heats up in London and money worries spike in California, another important battle is playing out more quietly about 70 miles north of the city at the Althorpe property. That's the traditional home of the Spencer line. At the heart of it is Charles, the current 9th Earl Spencer, the person who once promised to protect Diana's boys from being swallowed up by the royal machine. Today, though, that promise of family protection has turned into something much more complicated. Politically, King Charles and Prince William have apparently put the Earl into a no-win position. Stand with the nephew who walked away or show allegiance to the king who remains in place. People familiar with events say the king's private secretary passed along a message to Althorpe that had nothing warm or emotional about it. It was a straightforward businesslike warning from the crown itself. The disloyalty Charles brought forward includes a series of private family papers from the Spencers that Harry is said to have tried turning into part of a high-value media deal worth millions. King Charles has made it very plain that helping Harry at this stage would be seen as giving aid to an opponent actively working against the same institution the Spencers have supported across generations. That puts Earl Spencer in an awful spot. Harry is still the son of his beloved late sister, the little boy Diana always seemed most anxious about. If the Earl gives in to the royal demand and locks the family records away from Harry, he breaks the bond with his nephew and opens himself up to being painted as the villain in some future Sussex project. On the other hand, the Earl is someone who deals in practical realities and knows Prince William will one day hold full sovereign power, going against both William and the King risks cutting off the entire Spencer family from important social and political circles. The King is said to be pressing the trustees at Althorpe to put special limits in place that block any more resources going to Harry on the grounds that he's now under sway from outside forces hostile to the crown. This isn't simply about blood ties anymore. It's about putting financial barriers in place to stop money or assets from flowing into legal fights in the United States. The Spencer family is now split right down the middle along this dividing line. With the major summit drawing closer, the Earl realizes that no matter which way he chooses, he'll be letting down someone he cares about deeply. The old story of shielding family has fallen away at all, replaced by the hard facts of where real power lies. While tension spreads through the English landscape, the true reason behind Prince William's worry is working at full speed 5,000 miles away inside courtrooms in Los Angeles. To people looking from the outside, stopping Harry's titles and locking down assets might look like nothing more than brothers quarreling. But reports suggest William's drive has shifted from being personally annoyed to a careful strategic worry about legal risks. The Prince of Wales is said to have handed his father a worrying dossier labeled the California risk. That file lays out a danger Harry might not have fully thought through the rules around shared property and marriage. William is keenly aware that if any part of royal inheritance or family assets gets placed into a joint California account, it stops being individual property and turns into something shared between spouses. The possibility that worries the future king the most is the idea of assets getting blended together. He's concerned that if Harry and Meghan's marriage ever ends, a judge in Los Angeles could in theory decide to split Diana's treasured possessions, including special pieces of jewelry and money set aside for her direct descendants right down the middle. For William, the thought of his mother's emerald collection being handed over to Meghan Markle as part of any settlement is something he finds impossible to accept. That's why the King's disclosure about Harry's private actions carries so much weight strategically. Removing the prince title ahead of the summit weakens Harry's position legally in the US and adds another layer of financial restriction. William is pushing hard for changes to a protective trust arrangement, a backup plan that would block Harry from ever touching the main inheritance funds. He wants legal rules in place that stop Harry from physically owning any of the jewelry, keeping those